Hi guys, welcome to Science. What week are we on? This is week 30. This is science for my South Locations class. And here we go. Let's dive in. Be ready with your paper and your pencil and write down two things that you remember from last week's lesson. So from week 29, what do you remember? I hope I told you the right week. Anyway, last week's lesson, what do you remember? Go ahead and write something down. I'm going to continue talking. We are going to have a little bit of a continuation from last week's lesson from one of the words that we discussed. So hopefully you have something written down because we are going to be diving into ecosystems and particularly the food chain. So I would have had an awesome game to play, but it would be a little hard to play it if I can't pass out cards and have you stand in the line. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to have to kind of talk about it and kind of go from there. So let's go ahead and dive right in. And I've got this awesome video that we're going to go ahead and let it introduce us to the food chain of and ecosystems. Ecosystems. There you go. Okay, let's go ahead and watch that video.
Here in the Everglades, as in all ecosystems, every living thing is linked together to form a very complex community. Everything is connected in some way. In order to grow and survive, there are two things that every organism needs: matter and energy. But where do these things come from, and how do they pass from one living thing to another? This process, the flow of energy and matter through a community, is most easily understood by constructing a simple illustration we call a food chain. Today we'll construct a typical Everglades food chain. But the story really starts about 93 million miles from South Florida. The sun is like an enormous nuclear reactor, radiating its rays across the solar system. Without the sun's energy, there would be no life on Earth. Without the sun, there would be no plants, the first link in our chain of life. Green plants, as well as cyanobacteria and certain types of algae, are able to harness the energy of the sun, converting it to food energy in the form of sugary compounds. We call these organisms producers, and this is where our food chain begins. The Everglades are full of producers, from sawgrass to mangroves. One very important producer is a slimy goo called periphyton. Periphyton is complicated stuff, but it's basically a mixture of different types of algae. It can be found covering the limestone floor and many of the submerged plants of the Everglades. The second link of our food chain is occupied by what we call a primary consumer. This is an herbivore, or a plant eater. For our chain, we'll use the mosquito larva. In its larval form, the mosquito is an aquatic herbivore, swimming around munching on organic matter. It loves periphyton. The gambusia, on the other hand, loves mosquito larvae. This is why we also call him the mosquito fish. We'll stick him in the third link of our food chain. The gambusia is what we call a secondary consumer. Secondary consumers are animals that eat primary consumers. Because the gambusia mostly eats other animals, he can be classified as a carnivore. The great blue heron is a fish eater. He has a dagger-like bill designed for spearing and snatching swimming prey. The heron is able to nab some pretty big fish, but the gambusia makes a nice appetizer. Because he mostly eats secondary consumers, this makes the great blue heron a tertiary consumer and gives him a spot on our fourth link. Now for the big guy. The American alligator is a formidable beast. As a fully grown adult, he's way at the top of the food chain. He's what we call a top predator, also known as an apex predator. For the gator, an unobservant great blue heron would be gourmet dining. This guy is aware of the danger. Time to go sunbathe elsewhere. When we construct a food chain, we notice that there are usually no more than about 4 or 5 links, from producer to top predator. There's a good reason for this. When one organism eats another organism, it uses up a lot of the food energy that is taken in, instead of passing all of it up to the next link in the chain. Much of that energy is used in digestion and other metabolic processes as the organism grows, and passes out into the environment as heat energy. At the same time, a lot of the matter is excreted as waste and is incorporated into the soil. In fact, the rule of thumb is that only about 10% of the energy that is consumed by an organism passes on to the next level. This is called the 10% rule. So basically, there can't be too many links in the chain, or the predators at the top of the food chain won't be able to get enough food energy to grow and survive.
Okay, that was super informative. So let's recap on a little bit of what he had talked about and how scary. He's like standing in like that swamp. I hope there's not an alligator that comes up and startles him. Okay, let's recap a little bit about the food chain. So the number and distribution of organisms in an ecosystem is limited by the availability of energy, food, and the ability of the ecosystem to recycle that matter. All right. Then we should all know this. The sun is the source of all energy. And nearly every ecosystem and different species within an ecosystem do their part to help cycle energy through it. So everyone think of an example that you can think of sun being the energy and animals using it to cycle through. Not just animals, everything in the ecosystem. How do we use that? Think of something, write it down. Okay, every food chain includes recyclers like fungi, worms, etc., which make the food web more like a cycle of energy, which is so true. When I think of it, I kind of think we start here, it does this, it does this, it does this, and we're back up here. So it's like a cycle, like a whole circle of energy, because we have the one main source, right? Okay, every ecosystem or food web has an organism that produces food. We learned that. Producers are organisms that use the sun to produce food. Why is that? Why do they use the sun to produce food? Because sun is energy and it helps them get their energy to grow to produce food. Okay, our primary consumers are organisms that consume another organism for energy. So can anyone think of an example of that? Primary consumers are organisms that consume another organism for energy. You can think of an example, write that down. Okay, all right, moving on. Secondary consumers are consumers that eat other consumers. So see if you can come up with an example for that as well. Secondary consumers are consumers that eat other consumers. All right, moving on. So tertiary consumers are carnivores. And what does that do to them? It puts them at the top of the food chain because they are carnivores. So when a food chain is drawn out, an arrow always points to where the energy is going. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some of our decomposers. So decomposers and scavengers are the primary recyclers. So by feeding on dead plant and animal life, they break down organic waste material and return essential elements such as nitrogen and phosphorus to the ecosystem. So as much as, some of our decomposers are slimy looking and a little weird, they are very important parts in the ecosystem, aren't they? Along with our carnivores, dietary. I struggle with that word. All right. Okay, so that was just a little educated video on our food chain with our ecosystem, and then just to touch base on a few. What we're gonna move into relationships with in the ecosystem. So they are called symbiotic relationships. What is a symbiotic relationship? So here's some examples, and then we're going to dive into understanding more about it. But a honeybee and a flower, that'd be an example of a symbiotic relationship. A clownfish and an anemone. Those are relationships that they kind of rely on each other. Not kind of, they most definitely rely on each other and for survival. But some symbiotic relationships do not end all happy with two survivors. And we're going to talk about those. So let's dive into understand more about our symbiotic relationships. Go ahead and pull open this other screen. Okay, so like I said, symbiotic relationships. Let's figure out what that is all about. Where did this is right there. Okay, so let's break that down. Species interactions. So symbiotic relationships could be known as species interactions. Species within a community develop close interactions known as symbiosis. Sym means together, bio means life, symbiosis means living together and describes the close relationships developed between species. Symbiotic relationships will always benefit at least one organism involved. All right, so there's 5 major types of symbiotic relationships. We're gonna listen closely because we're gonna have some examples at the end, and you're gonna have to label which these are. So why don't you guys go ahead and write these all down right now so you can make some little notes next to the word of what will remind you what it is, okay? I need to make some notes too. We might have to come back to this a few times. All right, hopefully not, we'll see. Okay, so like I said, 5 major types. We have the predation, parasitism, yeah. Competition, mutualism, and commensalism. All right, weird big words, right? Predation, parasitism, competition, mutualism, commensalism. So let's find out what each of them mean. So hopefully you all wrote them down. I'll give you another second to look at that screen. Okay, let's go on. All right, very first one is predation. It is the relationship where one organism captures and consumes another. So predator, which is predation, half of that. Predator is an organism doing the capturing, and the prey is an organism being captured. So our picture up there is a good example of a shark going after a fish. Is the fish gonna win? Nope. Is the shark gonna win? Yes. A predator's survival depends on its ability to catch its prey. So an example, a rattlesnake venom, spider web, etc. So it has to figure out how it's gonna catch its prey in order to get its nutrients that it needs. A prey's survival depends on its ability to avoid being caught. So we've got camouflage, mimicry, physical or chemical defenses. All right, so make a little note on predation, what that reminds you of. Maybe it's the shark, maybe it's, yeah. So predation is our 2 words put together, a predator and a prey. The predator needs prey, the prey needs to be able to protect itself from that predator. All right, let's go on. So a parasitism is, well, all right, Parasitism is a symbiotic relationship where the organism is harmed and the other is helped. So this is not a very healthy relationship either, is it? We have a parasite that feeds on the host organism. And then unlike predation, it does not result in the immediate death of the host, but it can sure make you sick and hurt you. So an example would be like a tapeworm would live inside the human digestive tract for a long period of time and definitely make you sick. So that is not a win-win situation. So parasitism would be a parasite living in a host. All right, so a parasite needs a host, and a host, a lot of the time, the host will not die, but they also might not know they have one. They could just be really sick. Okay, so hopefully you got some notes taken for that. All right, so a little bit more on our parasitism. There are two different types of parasites. We have the ectoparasites and we have the endoparasites. So an example of an ectoparasite is it's external, so it's going to be more noticeable. It's going to live on the outside of the host. So that could be, let's see, like a tick or a flea or a mosquito. And then we have the endoparasite that is internal. So this is the one that you're not going to know that's hurting you because you don't know what's in there. So that is going to be like a tapeworm, bacteria, a protist. That's going to be on the inside. So two different kind of parasitisms, the ectoparasite and the endoparasite. So ecto is going to be your mosquito, your tick, your fly. Sorry, not fly, your flea. And the endo is going to be on the inside, like a tapeworm. All right, moving on. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is competition. Competition, the use of the same limited resource. Sorry, competition. The use of the same limited resource by two or more species in the same place at the same time. So resource equals anything necessity of life. That's water, nutrient, light, food, space. Anything that would help them be able to live. So competition may cause the development of different niches or physical characteristics. Let's move on to mutualism. Mutualism is a symbiotic relationship where both organisms are helped in some way. So this would be an example of our honeybee and flower. So this is a healthy relationship, right? So an example would be plants and their pollinators. Pollinators feed on the plant and the pollen gets stuck to them. Then the pollen is deposited on the next plant, allowing the plants to be pollinated. So it's a good little system, right? That's a healthy symbiotic relationship. Okay, commensalism. A commensalism is a symbiotic relationship where one organism benefits and the second is neither harmed nor helped. So this one doesn't, do anything for the other, right? So example, a whale and a barnacle. The barnacles have the benefit of moving through water attached to the whale, and the whale receives no benefit, but it's not harmed either. So is this a healthy one? I don't know. It doesn't do any harm, so it could be okay. Okay, now we're gonna start. Don't look. Okay, now I want you guys to go ahead and write down what you think of those 5 that we talked about. See, I knew I should have wrote them down because now I can't remember. We need to go back to that slide. Let's go back. Isn't it like 3? Yep, perfect. Okay, predation, parasitism, competition, mutualism, commensalism. So of those 5, you are going to write down which of the animals I'm going to show you fits in any of these words. Predation, parasitism, competition, mutualism, commensalism. Okay? All right, back to slide 10. We have, oh my goodness. There we go. I'm not going to click ahead. Okay, what type is this? Ostriches and gazelles. Do they eat each other? Do they coexist in each other's lives? How does that work? What kind of symbiotic relationship is this one? And I'm not going to be giving you answers, but you need to remember if it's commensalism, if it's the predator, mutualism. So go ahead and write that down. Actually, we are going to review. So it's commensalism. I was going to skip these ones, but we're not. We'll just talk about it. So ostriches and gazelles eat next to each other, but they both watch out for danger. So they would both warn each other if danger comes. So they benefit each other. So it's a commensalism. All right, what type is this? We have cuckoos and warblers. So they're both birds. Are they carnivore birds? Do they, think about this one. What would they fall under? Predation, commensalism. Okay, hopefully you wrote something down. They are parasitism. The cuckoo bird will lay its eggs in a warbler's nest. The warble will then take care of the cuckoo's eggs. When the cuckoo hatches, it will push the other eggs out of the nest. So that's interesting, kind of sad, right? Kind of cool though that the warbler will take care of the eggs, but the cuckoo will just push everything out when it hatches. Okay, here we have oxpeckers and rhinoceroses. So those are those little birds that are on top of the rhinoceros's back. What type of relationship is this? Is only one benefiting or are they both? And next, it's mutualism. So the oxpecker bird gets a free meal when it eats the ticks and bugs that drink the rhinoceros's blood. So this is definitely a two-way benefit because the rhinoceros is getting a nice little spa bath with the bird eating everything off his back, and the oxpecker is getting a free meal. Definitely a healthy relationship right there. What about this? We have remoras and sharks. So those are those little like sucker fish that will follow around shark and eat the scraps. I might have just given it away. All right, it is commensalism. A remora fish attaches itself to a shark so it can eat the scraps of food left by the shark. It does not harm the shark when it attaches to it. So this is definitely a win, right? It's almost like a bib for the shark. So the shark is getting stuff cleaned up around him, and the little remora fish is getting a free meal. Commensalism is that one. Okay, what about a flea attached to a mouse? What would that be? What kind of relationship is that? Parasitism. Parasitism. One of the two. So a flea hooks onto a mouse and drinks the mouse's blood. So this is a no-win for the mouse, right? Because eventually it will make the mouse so weak. So not a good one, not a healthy one. Lions and hyenas. How do they help each other if they do? What do you guys think? It makes me think of Lion King. What do you guys think? Which category do they fall under? Competition, for sure. Hyenas and lions cover the same ground, they hunt the same prey, and they scavenge the same remains of animals. Consequently, they steal food from each other, chase each other, and even kill each other's young. So, very competitive, like Lion King, right? They were going to start to take over when Scar betrayed them. So, definitely not trustworthy, both of those. Okay, what type of symbiotic relationship is the salmonfish and the grizzly bear? What would that fall under? Predation, mutualism, parasitism? What does it fall under? Commensalism. Predation. The grizzly eats the salmon. The grizzly is the predator. The salmon is the prey. The prey is weak and cannot do much unless it can swim faster and get away from from the bear, but most times I would guess that the bear wins. And what a great meal to eat as well. Okay, what about the stork and bees? What kind of relationship do they have? Mutualism. The stork uses its sharp beak to cut up the dead animals after it eats. Afterwards, the stork uses its sharp beak to cut up the dead animals it eats. Afterwards, a certain species of bees come along and they lay their eggs in the dead meat so they can hatch. So that's interesting, right? Had no idea. Pretty cool though. All right, what about a hermit crab and snails? What do they have in common? What is their relationship with each other? Good, bad, beneficial? What is it? Commensalism. Hermit crabs live in a snail shell that the snails have left behind. So definitely benefits the hermit crab and needs to happen so that the hermit crab has a hiding spot, right? Just got a few more here. Okay, the silverfish and army ants. What do they have? What kind of relationship do they have? Predation? Mutualism? Commensalism. Silverfish bugs live and hunt with army ants. They share the prey. That's kind of cool. So healthy, right? All right. What type of symbiotic relationship do members of the human family have? The next page is another question, so you can still take time to answer it. So, the human family, it can vary depending on your position in the family, right? So, mutualism would best be like you and your family to benefit. Commensalism would be one of you benefits, the either neither benefits or is harmed. And competition is you or one or more of your family members competing for resources. Where do you guys fit in that? I would love for you guys to be able to raise your hands and tell me as your relationship with your family, where you guys would fit in. But just think about it for a minute. Where do you fit in with your family under these categories? The next slide is a question, so get ready to answer. So you're going to think about this, and here we go. What type of relationship do you think is best and why? And I am so excited to see all of your answers, so don't forget to have your parents screenshot this paper and send it to me. So the first question, what type of relationship do you think is best and why? And how can you help create more mutualism in your family? How can you personally create more mutualism in your family? Let's go back one slide. Mutualism is you and your family benefit. How can that help you in your family? What can you do in your family that you and your family are benefiting from? You're fighting or, stuff like that. Is that beneficial? So, what type of relationship do you think is best and why? And how can you help create more mutualism in your family? Okay, I'm super excited to see what you guys come up with. And don't forget to have your parents screenshot this. And mine would be, I think mutualism is the best because it benefits both people, both things, both parties. And and it's also contributing. So it takes one to do something nice, but then once you do something nice, that person will want to return it. So I think mutualism goes there nicely. So there's my answer. That's how I feel. Hopefully you guys understood this lesson. There was so much involved in it, and so much of it I wanted to be able to do in the classroom because, you know, when you're acting things out, it's much easier to understand them. So hopefully you guys got it all. All right, that is it for today, and we'll see you guys again. Have a good one. Thanks for joining me.